Godzilla has been a cultural phenomenon in Japan since the first film in 1954. Since then, the beast has taken the world by storm, terrifying audiences across the globe. But what if he wasn't just on the big screen, but actually attacked in real life? Let's explore. Get ready, it's time to ask the question, what if Godzilla was real? There have been a number of Godzilla films since the original in 1954, and each version of the monster has its own quirks. For the sake of clarity, this video will focus on Shin Godzilla, the 2016 film, as it is one of the most realistic depictions of the attack. Godzilla is a giant aquatic creature, often attacking Japan. It is believed to have been created due to radioactive contamination, which gave it the ability to constantly adapt to its surroundings. It leaves a trail of residual radiation in its wake and is able to shoot atomic blasts from its mouth and tail. Godzilla is one tough cookie, so how could we deal with it? The first step would have to be to evacuate all civilians from the area. Depending on the population density in the area of the attack, this could take some time, but it would be of the utmost importance. Between Godzilla's attacks, atomic breath, and residual radiation left after it, not to mention the attempts to stop the beast, those in the area would be in a great deal of danger. Once the area was evacuated, efforts to deal with the beast could begin in earnest. Unfortunately, it seems that most weapons don't work against Godzilla. As we saw in the 2016 film, even powerful missiles were unable to pierce its thick hide. This would lead one to look to nuclear weapons, but this raises another concern. How would you stop this huge and tanky beast while minimizing collateral damage? One possible option is capturing Godzilla. This would be very useful since it would allow us to study the beast and learn from it, and would likely be less damaging to the city and its people. Unfortunately, this would be difficult to achieve, particularly with its atomic breath able to blast it out of most containment areas. Furthermore, if it had the same adaptive abilities as it did in Shin Godzilla, the longer it was alive, the more dangerous it would become. This likely rules out the option of capturing it alive, since there's a chance that it would simply adapt to whatever was holding it captured. This means that killing it would likely be the only option. Sadly, that's easier said than done. Shin Godzilla offered two potential solutions to the Godzilla problem. The first and less desirable option is the aforementioned use of thermonuclear weapons. This would potentially be enough to take the creature out, but would result in a huge amount of collateral damage. Not only that, but attacking a radioactive creature with nuclear weapons could result in unexpected consequences. The likely superior plan, which ended up being very effective in the film, is the use of blood coagulant to freeze the monster from the inside. This was done by baiting it into using its atomic breath, then quickly injecting it with coagulant while it was recharging. This would be a difficult plan and would require a great deal of coordination, but it could be very effective, especially if Godzilla was killed for good, thus preventing further adaptation. The only problem is, this coordination could be difficult to achieve. One aspect of defending against Godzilla that is often overlooked is the bureaucratic side of things. While one might assume that a giant monster attacking a city would be enough to bring people together, that isn't necessarily the case. As we've seen in various relief efforts in recent years, sometimes the resources are there to help, but the hands of the government are tied due to policy restrictions. As it happens, Shin Godzilla did an excellent job of highlighting just how much of a problem governmental bureaucracy would be in dealing with Godzilla. With so many different branches of the government being in charge of different things, it is very difficult to coordinate all these efforts successfully and quickly. This means that even if we had the proper weaponry to deal with Godzilla, it could be difficult to organize and coordinate the effort in time to save the city. This would be particularly problematic when attempting to coordinate the actions of several governments. And now we return to our question, what if Godzilla was real? Well, humanity would be in for the fight of our lives. Civilian safety would be a primary concern, with efforts to evacuate citizens from the area of the attack. Capture may not be an option if it had the adaptive capabilities we saw in Shin Godzilla, which leaves us with killing the beast. While nuclear weapons would likely be effective, the collateral damage caused could be too much to bear. For this reason, a method similar to the one in the film would likely be employed. Fool it into expending its nuclear energy, then freeze or incapacitate it while it is dormant. Unfortunately, this might be easier said than done, since government bureaucracy could delay the response until it was too late.
Alright, so in one corner we got King Kong. He's a massive ape, we're talking about 100 feet plus, at least according to the most recent film Kong Skull Island. He's big, he's strong, and he's ruthless. It takes a lot to get this beast down. But there is one monster who may be up to the task. In the other corner, we got Godzilla, standing anywhere from a couple hundred feet to almost 1,000 feet tall, depending on which film or media we refer to. This monster has the ability to live on land or underwater. Aside from this, Godzilla has a fire breath of sorts, which is really an atomic breath and much more destructive than fire. He's also incredibly durable, and although not indestructible, some may seem to think so. And given that we're going with the most recent Kong film to size up the big old ape, let's keep it the same monster universe, which means Godzilla, according to the recent film Godzilla King of the Monsters, stands at 393 feet tall. It was the film prior, Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, that saw him at 984 feet, for some reason. However, this is not a part of the previously mentioned monster universe. So these two face off, and the real easy answer is that Godzilla absolutely beats the out of King Kong. Kills him. Dead. Easy. No problems at all. He's triple Kong's size. I'm not sure what damage Kong can really do to Godzilla. However, for some reason in the trailer, they appear to be relatively evenly sized, in regards to height at least. So we'll go along with this narrative that both these monsters are the same size and decide to fight, so they're the last two warriors left from an ancient war. Of course, they're both fighting for different teams, which means ultimately only one can remain, crowning the victor of the battle and war. So these two go head to head. Who wins? Well, that all depends on where this happens. Of course, as per the movie's trailer, it shows the two of them fighting both on land and water. I think the realistic and safe bet is to say that if these two fought in the water, Godzilla would likely win fairly easily. Given his speed advantage, as well as being able to breathe underwater, something obviously Kong can't do, it seems Godzilla would have too many advantages to easily give him a win in this battle. However, if the two fought on land, well, that's a different story. Not to say by any means that it's a walk in the park for Kong, because it certainly would not be. In fact, I can't even say for sure who would win the battle of these two on land, as it depends on a lot of variables. Who gets hit first? Who has the better abilities? Although again, it seems Godzilla wins there. But Kong is incredibly strong, and like an ape, not easy to take down at all. Specifically referencing the atomic breath, it seems in the previous Godzilla vs. King Kong film from 1962, Kong was somewhat resistant, although it was noted a direct blast could kill him. Much like Godzilla, Kong is incredibly durable, and smart, quickly figuring out his opponent's weakness and attacking. As previously mentioned, numerous factors and variables go into deciding who wins this one, and although I've always liked Kong over Godzilla, it seems Godzilla would inevitably win this one, simply due to the fact that he is less likely to worry about his surrounding environment. As we've seen with Kong in the films, he's not so aggressive, and is actually somewhat gentle to those who aren't trying to bring him harm. With this in mind, it's more likely than not that Kong finds himself somewhat compromised, trying not to injure any innocent civilians around him. Maybe he doesn't think twice about the people and just focuses on the giant monster trying to kill him. I really can't say for sure, guys. What I can say for sure is that if these two were to go at it, wherever that battle would take place, well, it would be completely destroyed. It would seem almost as if an entire war had broken out. Assuming that every time these two strike each other and one falls, craters form in the streets. Obviously, surrounding buildings and properties would be completely wrecked and potentially used as a form of weapon. The monsters could either use the buildings as a blunt object or throw their opponent into them. Surely this would cause earthquakes of insane magnitude to affect the surrounding areas of wherever this fight were to take place. And if there were large bodies of water nearby, that likely means tsunamis would form as well. Bundle all of the unnaturally caused natural disasters along with these two 100-foot monsters beating each other up, and you got yourselves a completely destroyed city. Likely country, because they're pretty big. I'm sure they would go like across the whole country. Really depends where the fight happens. All in all, guys, it's no good. That's safe to say.
Since the first Godzilla dropped way back in 1954, there have been a grand total of 36 Godzilla movies released, 32 of them made in Japan and 4 by American studios. That's a lot of Godzilla, don't you think? Now, not every Godzilla movie totally overhauled the design of the legendary monster, meaning that there aren't 36 brand spanking new Godzillas out there. There are quite a few other monsters in the Godzillaverse though, but for today we'll stick to our titular titan. Today we'll do our best to briefly look at a few iterations of Godzilla and then pick the one who could squash the rest of the competition. Wouldn't that be fun, a Godzilla Battle Royale? Could be a movie, could be a video game, somebody make it happen. But until somebody from Toho decides to officially bring all the different Godzillas together, we'll just have to stick to discussing the implications of such a fight. Right on. It's gonna get sorta weird, especially because of how Godzilla works. See, if we look at how the monster developed over the years, one would likely see that Godzilla tends to get stronger after every movie. Like, it'll struggle against an antagonist for the duration of one flick, and then in the next movie it'll be clear that Godzilla is now a cut above that previous beast. Sure, there will be stronger enemies, but Godzilla knows how to overcome any challenge. That's just how Godzilla do. So as we move along on the Godzilla timeline, we might see a pattern emerging. Try not to focus on the size of the kaiju when discussing strength. Godzilla also has a history of annihilating much larger beasts, which is definitely worth considering. With all that out of the way, let's get into the meat and bones here, the radioactive meat and bones, if you will. Kicking us off at the absolute weakest, we've got Shin Godzilla. It's a great movie, don't get me wrong, but this is a version of Godzilla that is super vulnerable to conventional weaponry for whatever reason. Most Godzillas shrug off human tech like it's nothing and barely break a sweat until an enormous otherworldly threat appears. A lot can tank like 50 nukes too. Shin Godzilla, even though it can evolve super rapidly and might someday become wicked powerful, is just too vulnerable to all sorts of attacks. And in the end, the humans just sort of like put it to sleep? Lots of fun to be had with his design, but let's be honest with ourselves. If any other Godzilla had to fight Shin Godzilla, it would be a bloodbath. Now with that out of the way, let's get to some more solid contenders. Next up in the pecking order is the OG Godzilla, 1954, black and white chaos for days, let's go. Now after discussing how Godzilla powers up after each movie, you could probably see this pick coming. It's not hard to see why, even though it is totally iconic and without it we wouldn't have Godzilla. 1954 is weaker than the rest of the lads. Now we'll jump ahead a little to ensure that we keep the big lad from the next movie in the conversation. There are a few Godzillas between 1954 and Monsterverse, but what can you do? Only so many hours in the day. So, the Monsterverse Godzilla, the one featured in King of the Monsters and the upcoming Godzilla vs. Kong, is pretty strong. Like, stronger than the Showa era Godzilla by a bit, which is pretty impressive. It managed to defeat Ghidorah after powering up thanks to Mothra, and became the de facto leader of the monsters. Like, even after taking on a head-on blast from the Oxygen Destroyer, Godzilla came back and battled it out. What a legend. However, in comparison to Godzillas of days past, this version doesn't quite cut it. Like, let's say mechagodzilla came to the party. Monsterverse would have zero chance. None. If the Oxygen Destroyer can sideline it for a little while, mechagodzilla would stomp it out like a poorly built campfire. Sheesh. The thing is, mechagodzilla isn't even the strongest. Space Godzilla is known to be stronger than both Godzilla and Mechagodzilla. Like, it exists because Godzilla and Biollante DNA were sucked into a black hole. It managed to travel faster than the speed of light in order to battle Godzilla on Earth. If Godzilla and the humans didn't team up to allow for Godzilla to absorb some next level cosmic power, it probably would have been game over pretty easily. Plus, just look at this thing. It's got enormous crystals spreading from all over its body. Wild. So if Space Godzilla doesn't top the list, then what does? Well, it's gonna be a close call between two of the most insane creatures going. We've got Heisei Godzilla, who ended up absorbing Space Godzilla and becoming what one might call infinitely powerful. It can destroy stars and shoot heat rays that hit a temperature of infinity. It carries enough power to annihilate entire planets. So what's gonna beat it when it's at full power? Well, Godzilla Earth is. Holy smokes, is this Godzilla strong. It can destroy moons, it can wipe out dimensional portals and fight high-dimensional beings. It's off the scales in pretty much every regard except for its size. But even that, coming in at 50 meters, is pretty impressive. There's no stronger Godzilla than Godzilla Earth, although Heisei Godzilla might put up a fight against it if you add some caveats. So there you have it, folks, the strongest version of Godzilla for all to see. I know I skipped a few popular versions of Godzilla in my ranking, but we only have so much time to go through it all. The Godzilla in the upcoming movie is pretty strong, but for now doesn't quite hold a candle to some of the greats. So what do you think? One would have to assume that the effects of a monster rampage would be widespread and far-reaching. Like, sure, the immediate infrastructure being toppled would cost a lot of money, but imagine all the fallout afterwards. Nuclear and economic, of course. You know, because Godzilla is essentially a giant walking nuclear weapon. Get it? Sorry. I'll get to the actual content. As a baseline, let's get some hard numbers going. We can discuss the general effects as we go. After doing some truly cursory research, I've discovered a few examples that we can pull from. Number one is a much more American issue, the aftermath of the final fight from the first Avengers movie. Remember when that was the most bombastic thing imaginable? Oh, how times have changed. I know it's not the perfect one-to-one comparison, but it's a good starting point. According to the Hollywood Reporter, the cost of an enormous city-spanning battle in the Big Apple would cost something like $160 billion. Holy smokes, right? The damage itself would make up a little less than half of that, with cleanup and environmental costs making up the rest. That's a pretty penny for sure, but at least the world was saved, right? And it's not like just one person would be picking up the tab either. Taxes and emergency funds would be used to ensure that life in the city could maybe one day return to normal. Of course, the cascading costs would be something else entirely. Once everything did get put back together, people would have to start imagining life in a world where this kind of thing happens again. So in addition to paying for all the repairs, new infrastructure would have to be put in place to stand up to possible future threats. Funds would need to be allocated towards programs to ensure safe and effective evacuations over time, and folks in power would have to make all sorts of promises to have all sorts of safeguards against supernatural attacks. To be honest, after an attack like that, a whole bunch of new jobs would probably be created too. But hey, that's just the Avengers we're talking about. Whatever crazy threat they face off against is likely less destructive overall than a kaiju battle, and less likely to require Geiger counters in the aftermath. Has anyone hashed out the exact price of a Godzilla attack? Well, actually, yes. IT Media Business talked with a Tokyo-based business consultant to try and put a price tag on a recent Godzilla outing. Looking at Shin Godzilla, the cost looks pretty hefty. The attacks this rapidly evolving kaiju masterminds would cost something like 9 trillion yen, or 87 billion US dollars. And that's just the physical, structural damage to Tokyo and its many buildings and amenities. We've also got to take into account the weapons used against the towering threat. Military technology is infamously expensive. Plus, in Shin Godzilla, stuff like bullet trains and drones are used and abused when fighting the beast, and they don't come cheap either. We can probably tack on a few more $1 billion to the attack because of that. This is all pretty surface level stuff though. Think about what would happen to all the people whose homes and businesses were wrecked during the attack. What are they supposed to do? Rapid evacuations aren't easy and require a lot of stuff to be mobilized immediately. And then once everyone's out of immediate danger, you've got to house and feed them for a while. Displaced people need somewhere to stay, and businesses need new bases of operation if they're to remain profitable. So there's all of that to consider. Plus, if we're now living in a world in which kaiju might just pop out of the ocean from time to time, it would probably be prudent to move major cities away from the coastline. A lot of pretty important places have developed right against oceans. Moving all of that infrastructure to less developed places and building new cities for all these kaiju-fearing folks would be a crazy undertaking to say the least. So the final price tag reported by Sora News 24 lands somewhere in the $815 billion range. Not cheap at all. And that's just considering Tokyo and the surrounding areas. If other major waterfront cities decided to follow suit just in case, there'd be a whole lot more spending going on. And something tells me that Godzilla doesn't have the funds to pay reparations. Maybe if we could weaponize the monster and use it as insurance in the coming days, or maybe teach it to build and make it do lots of heavy lifting, although that is tough for a creature with relatively short arms. Dang. Now, after all that, I have some additional bad news. Shin Godzilla, although it has potential to be quite destructive, is one of the weakest iterations of the legendary kaiju to date. Plus, it didn't fight against any other monster. All it did was attack Tokyo and fend off humanity's weapons. If a stronger version of Godzilla touched down in Tokyo, the damage would likely be a lot more severe. Could you imagine the cost of repairing whatever got annihilated by an infinite spiral heat ray? Or what if this version of the legendary lizard had to fight off another threat? The crossfire would definitely make some wallets weep. So yeah, a Godzilla attack would present the world with a whole lot of damage to fix, but the physical damage is just the beginning. All the buildings destroyed had a purpose, and those purposes would need to be relocated ASAP if folks didn't want everything to fall apart. Add in the cost of essentially dealing with a city's worth of displaced people, and you've got a whole new issue to contend with. A threat like a kaiju would alter the way the world operated on a level we've never seen. It would present us with an existential threat previously unheard of. Although it could actually be a good thing. Sure, it would put quite a strain on the economy as we know it, with plenty of money and resources required to repair the damage. But if we pivoted from intercontinental competition and our current profit-based mindset to a more unified one meant to protect humanity from Godzilla and his contemporaries, maybe we'd find this new purpose was better for us overall, helping each other because we're human, rather than because we can make some money and prove ourselves better than everyone else. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad after all.
Now, there's a lot of exposition here that could potentially hinder our results, the majority of which come down to which varying fictional versions of both Godzilla and Cthulhu that we present. In most scenarios, both Godzilla and Cthulhu are such vastly opposing entities that they'd probably never even notice each other's presence. But that's not any fun at all, is it? We want to see some cataclysmic showdown that sunders the planet smack bang down the middle, great thundering behemoths going toe to toe in an abyssal melee that heralds the beginning of the cosmos tearing itself apart. So, in the words of Maximus Decimus Meridius, are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
Before we plunge into that bizarre kettle of fish though, you know how it is by now guys. If you're a fan of this video, Godzilla, the Lovecraftian mythos, or just life's biggest questions in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button as well as that subscribe bell so you can stay up to date with our latest and greatest uploads. If you've got a big question that you just can't keep to yourself, then please spit it out in the comment box down below. On with the show. Our boy Cthulhu, the Sleeper of R'lyeh, the High Priest of the Great Old Ones, is a fictional cosmic entity created by the grandfather of science fiction horror horror himself, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. And since his first inky inception in 1928's The Call of Cthulhu, he's been so prevalent in modern culture that you'll even find his tumultuous tendrils painted on a children's lunchbox. But that's no grand feat compared to the god of destruction, the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla, who's no stranger to the artistic immortalization of Tupperware. Godzilla's first appearance was in Ishiro Honda's 1954 silver screen apocalypse of the same name, which swiftly launched the King Lizard into the lofty ranks of monstrous cultural icons. Since then, both of these world-ending buddies have seen scores of recreations and canonical additions that have augmented their varying campaigns of destruction. First, we should hone in on what makes these big guys tick, and the arsenal they've got to play with under their metaphorical hoods. Since his time spent on the silver screen, Godzilla has thrown down with some of the most powerful entities in the cosmos. He's racked up a staggering 58 bouts throughout his time as the king of the monsters, notching 42 wins, 7 losses, and 9 draws. That's a pretty impressive ratio, considering that Godzilla isn't exactly battling for entertainment, but more to be the destroyer or savior of the planet. Let's not beat around the bush. Godzilla is incredibly powerful, so let's not dismiss him as some giant lizard that breathes atomic energy. Godzilla towers in at over 118 meters tall, which varies on the version, but we'll use Shin Godzilla as a benchmark, and weighs in at a staggering 100,000 tons. Just his heart measures 60 feet across and weighs 100 tons, pumping 530,000 gallons of blood around his enormous frame. He's resistant to nuclear blasts and all manner of humanity's modern weaponry, and he can bring the world's greatest armies to their knees with a mere belch. Godzilla's most iconic means of destruction is his trademark atomic breath, which, while it sounds like a grotesque cloud of miasma, is actually a highly concentrated beam attack of unbridled atomic energy that can level entire cities without breaking a sweat. Combine that with his spiral heat ray, his nuclear pulse, and his nigh immortal durability, and Godzilla is looking like quite the contender in this hypothetical bout. In fact, in the Godzilla in Hell storyline, a comic miniseries released in 2015, Godzilla himself marches into hell and annihilates Satan, and to bring his point home, he even brings down the big guy upstairs. Forget that though, because Godzilla has even killed Zeus, the father of the Greek pantheon, so as far as gods go, the god of destruction really does live up to his namesake. But what about great old ones, which, if I'm being honest, is where this showdown is ultimately decided. Comparatively, Cthulhu is incredibly weak when you stand him up against Lovecraft's Yog-Sothory. At the bottom of the pecking order, we've got the great old ones, where Cthulhu resides as their high priest, granted pretty powerful, but above that we have the elder gods, arguably of equal strength, but who regularly successfully oppose the great old ones. And then we have the outer gods, who, let's face it, are the most powerful entities in the cosmos. It's not even worth trying to pit opponents against them, because no matter how hard you try, you can't brawl against the intangible. Put it this way, in the Call of Cthulhu, the sleeping god is defeated by ramming a small tugboat into him, ripping his head apart like an exploded bladder. Lovecraft's words, not mine. A freaking boat ripped him in two. What do you think Godzilla would do to him? But here's the thing, and I know it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you need. In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. It doesn't matter what you do to him, sleeping or semi-awake, Cthulhu can only and will only bring destruction when the stars are correctly aligned. Even if he's defeated, he'll regenerate or be rebirthed by his daughter wife Cthulhu. Godzilla wins this battle hands down. The king of the monsters is just far too powerful, even compared to the majority of the Cthulhu mythos. But it'd be like watching a rabid dog tear apart a fluffy new pillow that also happens to constantly regenerate itself in an eternal cycle of abyssal slumber. Yeah, that's an image that I'll just let you ponder on. Let that sink in.
Space Godzilla, my goodness. So for those of you who aren't aware of the 1994 Japanese masterpiece, Space Godzilla is a mutant Godzilla who was already a mutant dinosaur itself in the first place. So yeah, Space Godzilla is a mutant dinosaur who came to be when Godzilla cells were brought into space and exposed to the radiation of a black hole. Sure. The mutant then destroys a space station on its way back to Earth and then hijacks the Fukuoka Tower as the power converter to turn the Earth's core into an absorbable energy source that will make it even stronger. Are you with me? Okay, glad you're up to speed. Oh, wait, and Space Godzilla has mind control powers, can fly, and can produce crystals that somehow make him stronger. good old Space Godzilla. So if Space Godzilla was real, the first to know about it would be our mates at NASA and the International Space Station. Although, if I were aboard the ISS, I might worry considering the dino's history of space station destruction. Presumably, Space Godzilla would be first spotted by NASA, who may mislabel the mutant as an asteroid or comet. Despite being a hefty 80,000 metric tons and 250 meters in flying height, in terms of a projectile hurtling Earth, it isn't really that big. NASA would probably leave him to it, assuming that as an asteroid it would burn up as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. Now, this would give nasty old Space Godzilla room to land. If Space Godzilla was real, I would not want to live in Japan. This space monster and its earthbound predecessor always seem to run riot in Japan, and in the movie it is the Fukuoka Tower that Space Godzilla destroys. The Destructo Dino has an aura that causes electrical disturbances, so if it were real, it could seriously mess up the power grid, causing widespread outages. The intergalactic mutant wants to use the Earth's core to generate power to sustain itself, slowly diminishing the core's ability to heat and sustain planet Earth. While this wouldn't be a quick destruction for us, make no mistake, Space Godzilla would eventually destroy the Earth if left unattended. This would mean that we would absolutely need to go into combat with the dastardly dino. In the Godzillaverse, humans unleash Mogura, a destructive robot with an arsenal of weapons. While we may not go down the robot route, the United Nations would definitely attempt to attack the pest using whatever means possible. Space Godzilla forms protective and empowering crystals, so we would need to destroy those and avoid its deathly corona beam, basically a catastrophic heat ray. Fighting Space Godzilla would come with a number of precarious challenges, not least the fact that he can float, fly, and control our minds. Our best way of defeating him is to get him on the ground and pin down his tail. His little dinosaur arms are pretty useless at fighting. We would basically need to trap him so that he was facing one direction and then shoot at him from the back. Now, you don't want to go approaching his fire-breathing end, so the back really is the only option here. Should we even kill him though? Well, that's the question really. Would we know his story, or would we assume that he's an alien? If we did, would we try and negotiate with him? Would we be worried about aggravating his lineage? If humans thought that Space Godzilla was an alien, would this bring the world closer together? Alien or not? I actually think so. I've honestly always thought the only thing needed for world peace would be a recognizable external threat. What would happen when the threat is eliminated? How much damage would we need to repair? I really have to wonder about these space crystals. Would they be precious? Would we harvest them and sell them for jewelry? Or, as a mineral, would it be useful to us? I'm certain that scientists would want to run tests on it to see how it's made and what it's made of. Right, now that we've mentioned the science of the whole thing, there are plenty of scientific questions here. In fact, I would even go as far as to call it a can of worms. For example, if Space Godzilla is real, does that mean that Godzilla is real? And if so, who created him and why? In the movies, Godzilla was spawned of radiation. Would this be the case in real life? And of course, if Space Godzilla was created with space radiation, if this is a thing, what other mutants could we make and unleash on Earth? Just to get really real for a second to end this video, Godzilla as a concept, as a science fiction mutant, came as a result of the devastating nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The monster was born from a real fear of what nuclear radiation can do, what it can destroy, and what horrors it can create.
Before we get into the fun stuff, let's just quickly touch on who Elon Musk is. One of the richest or the richest person in the world, depending on when you're watching this video, Musk has definitely made headlines over the last few years for his wild ideas. Of course, Tesla is something most people love. It's stylish, classy, and very good for the environment. Then SpaceX is another thing that some think are cool while others feel is a bit wacky. Of course, we got Neuralink, which Elon believes will not only allow people to control technology using their brain, but can also help with severe injuries, such as paralysis. Not as many people are on board with that one, because it puts a chip in your brain, but I mean, no, I'm not even gonna make that joke, guys. He's also been responsible for PayPal, which is used pretty much internationally on a daily basis. To say Elon is an innovator, a genius, and a huge figure in society in general would be very accurate. But as we know, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And at some point, well, Elon may very well snap and decide rather than help the world, well, he wants to destroy it. And that's where mechagodzilla comes in. Now if you have no idea what mechagodzilla is, well, just watch season 1 episode 12 of South Park, titled Mecha Streisand. If you get that reference, just know you probably had an incredible childhood. Mechagodzilla is what you think it is, a mechanical version of Godzilla. Known as the arch-enemy to Godzilla, Mechagodzilla is not only one of the final bosses in Godzilla Save the Earth on PS2, but is also incredibly powerful. Its first debut was in the 1974 film Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, in which the latter is an alien. However, in other films and media, Mechagodzilla is man-made to defend Japan from the real Godzilla. In this case, Mechagodzilla would obviously be man-made, thanks to Elon. So what is Mechagodzilla, also referred to as Mechazilla, capable of? Well, for starters, it's incredibly durable, considering it's made up mostly of metal and other forms of machinery. Some of its abilities include shooting lasers from its eyes, arms that can turn into machine guns, a tail which can shoot lightning, and some Gatling guns in his chest armor which, again, are like machine guns. Powerful thing to say the least. Depending which version of the beast we use, if you'd even call it that, he stands anywhere from 160 feet to 390 feet, weighing anywhere from 40,000 to 150,000 tons. Bottom line is, this thing would be really big and really heavy. Does that mean it would be indestructible? Not necessarily, as again, if it really is all metal and uses electricity and technology, well, just tossing this bad boy in the ocean may very well fry it. That being said, it could also potentially be problematic for the ocean, so maybe we shouldn't do that. And truth be told, I'm sure Elon would find ways to make sure if a bit of water got on his creation, it wouldn't implode on itself. So then what happens? Well, Elon would just control the most powerful weapon in the world and in a sense would have full reigns if he wanted. Odds are the world's official currency would be Dogecoin, all government vehicles would be Teslas, and we'd all be born with chips implanted in our brains. At birth, of course. Fun stuff. Now on a more serious note, I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that if Elon really did put in the work to create a machine similar to that of Mechagodzilla, well, it would be for security purposes only. And we're not talking about security for his estate, but national security. Maybe he'd make like a mini one for his house or something, I don't know. Working with the military to create something so powerful it could potentially even rival nuclear warfare. Now in one of the films, a nuke actually does take out Mechagodzilla, but I mean, given how powerful nukes truly are, if someone could find a way to almost counterbalance the damage it could do to an entire nation, I think a Mechagodzilla wouldn't be such a crazy idea. Imagine a country tries to attack the United States with nuclear warfare, and rather than trying to intercept it using another missile or some sort of defense tactic, this big mechanical Godzilla jumps up and grabs it out of the air and then throws it like a football. We're talking like Tom Brady style, like an Odell Beckham one-hand catch, and then just and there goes the nuke, just right, back to wherever it came from. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little too Hollywood with it, but it does seem Mechagodzilla can fly, and I'm sure Elon would make sure of that as well. All in all, I doubt Elon would turn evil and make a robotic Godzilla to take over the world, but it is possible he makes one and then works with the US government, or whichever government he feels he wants to help, by providing them with a Mechagodzilla. It costs billions of dollars and likely decades to complete, but I mean, with the way we're going, who knows? Maybe something like this comes to fruition before we know it. We can all just watch an episode of The Simpsons to find out, I guess.